I lacked sleep. I felt like I was in a dream. And somehow, when it all cleared at the end of the day, I'd won the world championship.
Where are you, Dan?
Here.
What time is it?
Now.
What are you?
This moment.
Dan Millman, from world champion gymnast and Stanford coach to best-selling author and global teacher, Dan's journey is one of discipline, resilience, and awakening. His classic book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, has touched millions of lives, including mine.
I never compared myself to anybody else. I often recommend to people, don't compare yourself because that's a disrespect for who you are.
In this conversation, we explore the turning points that shaped his path, from the accident that transformed his search for meaning to his encounter with Socrates. The brain and the mind is like a sponge, especially at a younger age.
This is the problem with young people because they look at their friends on Facebook and TikTok, whatever, Reels, seem to be having more fun, seem to be better looking because the lighting's right and they're all prepared. But they don't realize that everyone has their own battle. Everyone has their own internal challenges.
The more you know, the more the unknown grows. I am Jitesh Vaswani, your host, and together, let's take this journey beyond the known. Dan Millman, welcome to Beyond the Known. We are very happy to have you here with us.
Thank you, Jitesh. I appreciate it.
Dan, your story begins with this incredible physical discipline, right? Dance, martial arts, gymnastics. What did winning the trampoline world championship as a freshman teach you about focus and mastery at a young age?
Well, to make this story short, I was 18 years old. I flew to London. The university paid my way, the UC Berkeley in California. And to save money, I flew in the same night as the competition. So I arrived about midnight. Of course, I had 9 hours jet lag from California, and my luggage didn't show up, so I got to sleep about 1 or 2 a.m. Had to get up at 7 because I had 8 o'clock as the competition started at the Royal Albert Hall in London. And I walked into the arena and saw Wayne Miller, one of the great trampolinists of the time, doing a move I'd never done, bouncing higher than I'd ever bounced.
Yeah.
So I was quite impressed. I was almost ready to ask him for his autograph. And there was Gary Irwin. Both of them, my top competition at that time were 2 other Americans, and they both had their coaches there with them. I was alone. My contact lenses were bothering me at the time. I lacked sleep. I felt like I was in a dream, and somehow, when it all cleared at the end of the day, I'd won the world championship. And so it taught me that you don't have to be at your absolute peak and perfectly prepared and ready. And in fact, when I was jumping on the routine, I knew my first 2 moves. I used to change routines all the time. Nowadays, they do one routine over and over and over until it's just the body knows it cold. But I was more a creative approach. So I actually, after my first 2 jumps, a 1.5 twisting double somersault, then a double twisting somersault, then I completely blanked out, forgot what I was doing. And I could very well have just stopped, but I kept going. That's another lesson I learned. I kept going. I just did a back, and then and when I finished the routine, I'd hoped I'd done 10 bounces, which is what you have to do. And I turned to the judges, and anyway, I won. So despite all that, it taught me something about the vagaries of life and how maybe fate or destiny. Because at another hour, another day, either Wayne or Gary Irwin, the USA champion, could have won the meet. But in that moment, that's what counts, the moment. And I also learned that, it didn't matter what emotions maybe I had self-doubt, insecurity in that position, but the emotions were not key. We have very little control over arising emotions. They pass through us like the weather patterns of the body. And thoughts, were my thoughts positive? I'm not sure. But I know I could control what I did. Effort over time, that's the horse I'm betting on. with all the new age ideas of manifesting and dreaming and imagining and making collages of what your desires are. Basically, I believe our lives are shaped by what we do moment to moment. And so all those lessons I learned, and athletes learn all kinds of lessons. So do musicians about life. It's like a master metaphor for their life. We don't know the lessons because we're so focused on the competition and the winning and the losing that we don't realize we're learning universal spiritual laws in our body, the law of process, step-by-step learning. And I never compared myself to anybody else because what good does that do? I often recommend to people, don't compare yourself because that's a disrespect for who you are, fundamentally. In fact, when I was coaching gymnastics at Stanford University and teaching beginning gymnastics, I noticed some people learned somersaults quicker than other people. Maybe they had a better background or preparation. But I also noticed that those who took longer to learn the move often learned it better than those who learned it quicker. So I think we each have to respect our own way of learning, our own way of living, and respect who we are, not compare ourselves to someone else. Everyone else is already taken. We have to do it, live our way.
And this is such an interesting learning, Dan, because I think in the world, we're like right now in 2025, especially the younger generation, they're constantly comparing themselves with others, especially with the advent of social media, Instagram. Even this podcast is going to be promoted on social media, right? And there's constant comparison as to with your peers, with your friends, with your, especially, the kids who are in school who are, I feel sometimes the brain and the mind is like a sponge, especially at a younger age, and it's so hard for them just because of social media and because of all of this comparison, right? What advice would you have for them how to deal with something like this?
Well, often I bring that up as a follow-up to my comment about comparison, but you've done it beautifully for me. So that's what a nice conversation flow we have going. This is the problem with young people because they look at their friends on Facebook and what TikTok, whatever, Reels, and their friends seem to be having more fun, seem to be better looking because the lighting's right and they're all prepared. But they don't realize that everyone has their own battle. Everyone has their own internal challenges. And they don't realize that each of us is a peaceful warrior in training, in the sense that we are all striving to live with a peaceful heart, a sense of serenity, equanimity in the chaos of everyday life. But at the same time, we need a warrior's spirit, not just for fighting necessarily, but to march into everyday life and tackle what we need to. And so we assume things about other people having more fun, the FOMO, fear of missing out and all that. But really, we don't realize the battles that even the most popular people, apparently popular, seem to be going through. They have their own challenges, or they will have in their own lives. And that's why we need, to respect our own way of living. One of the fundamental tenets of this approach to living that I teach,
right,
other than the focus on what we do moment to moment, is that there's no best book, no best teacher or philosophy or film or diet or system of exercise or martial art or anything else. There's only the best for each of us at a given time of our life that can change over time. So life is an experiment. We have to find out what works for me. And that involves self-knowledge and that quest and so on.
That's wonderfully put. And I could take away two things just from this very answer is like the way of peaceful warrior. There are two different words. The essence of peace is in the inner world, right? The essence of warrior is in the world of action, is in the outer world, right? Now, how do you bridge these two worlds, right? A brief background, Dan, about a little bit of what I do. I work with the art of living. I teach meditation. I teach breath work. And for me, that way is through the breath. And I would love to hear your take on how do you do it for yourself and what would be your advice for our listeners?
That's a beautiful question. And I'd like to tell a brief story
Yes.
in response. And it seems like I'm going a little broader than the question, but I'll get back to it.
No worries. Go for it.
The old man I called Socrates, we
Yes.
were walking down Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley one day. This is a story I tell. And I saw, this is back in the late 60s, and the Vietnam War was raging, and there were so many wrongs that needed right in the world, as they are today. And I said, Socrates, I just saw this poster about starving children and oppressed peoples and the Vietnam War. Shouldn't I be more active? Shouldn't I be protesting and more active in the world? And he stopped and turned to me and said, take a swing at me. And I said, what? Did you hear what I was just saying? He said, come on, I'll give you $5 if you can manage to slap me on the cheek. So I started bobbing and weaving, and then I took a swing at him. And in the next moment, I found myself on the ground in a rather painful wrist lock. And as he helped me to my feet, I was shaking my wrist out. He said, you notice a little leverage can be very effective? I said, yeah, I noticed, Sock, and he said, well, if you want to help others and you want to be socially active, politically active, of course, do what your heart tells you. But don't neglect the work on yourself so you can develop the clarity, the commitment, the courage to know how to exert the right leverage at the right place at the right time and really be effective. So it's not an either or. Should I navel gaze and just work on myself, or should I be active in the world? Both are very important. So in responding to the idea of the peaceful warrior, I was teaching a martial arts course at Oberlin College when I was an assistant professor there. And I was going to call it for this school catalog, The Way of the Warrior, which makes sense. It's Aikido and Tai Chi. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, these are internal arts. These are not really aggressive arts. They're more receptive. I said, in a light bulb moment, I said, why don't I call it The Way of the Peaceful Warrior? So that's when I coined the term, way back in the early 70s. And when I wrote the book, that term came up. I didn't know what to call the book. It was about so many things in life, bigger picture, that I said, hey, I'll call it The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And that's how everything took shape. So that's why it's not an either or. Of course we meditate. We do various inner work to clarify our consciousness. And even with diet and other areas to kind of help purify the body in various ways at a phase in our life. But at the same time, look, let me put it this way. When I was young, I was really into self-improvement. I was learning not only transcendental meditation, Zazen, but I was learning ventriloquism. I was taking memory courses, speed reading. I was learning acrobatics, martial arts. And one day, after all this self-improvement, learning to play a musical instrument and so on, I realized no matter how much I improved myself, only one person benefited. But if I could somehow improve the lives of other people, to influence them in some positive way, I had no idea how yet at that point in my life, that made my life more meaningful. So I was called early on to try to influence, to teach, to share somehow. And it was only years later that I thought of actually, gee, maybe I could write a book. And I thought a few college students might like it. Not that it would be in 29 languages, around the world. I had no idea. And turned into a movie, and all that stuff. So that was the shift I made, that it wasn't enough to improve myself or to do internal work, but it had to translate in some way into the world.
Wow. And as you were describing this, Dan, I feel like life kind of is very intelligent in itself, that it throws us these challenges so that we can implement a lot of these lessons that you're talking about. And one of the challenges that I saw it in the movie, and if you can share a little bit from that time in your life when you met with the motorcycle accident, and then also how did you end up meeting Socrates, your mentor, right? Now, obviously, I've seen the movie, but for some of our listeners who may not have read the book or who may not have seen the movie, can you paint the picture? What was happening in your life? How did you deal with it at that point? and what lessons were you learning at that point?
Sure, glad to. Now, let me acknowledge, yes, I did have a motorcycle crash, and my right leg, my right thigh bone, my femur, was shattered in about 40 pieces, the doctor said. And they had to put a nail down the middle of the bone and do open surgery and so on. But people have had much worse injuries, obviously, brain injuries, paralysis. So in a way, I was lucky. But it was quite painful and disruptive to my life. I was in my top physical shape, aiming for the Olympics and all that. And it was actually after that motorcycle accident that shook me up, that maybe opened me up to different aspects of life. We've all had a moment, why did I decide to start meditating? Maybe you come from that tradition, or maybe not. But why did I start doing inner work? And that's what shook me up. I realized my own mortality, because 20-somethings are, bulletproof.
Right.
They can do anything,
Yeah.
People in their 20s. And they're given that confidence to drive their way into life. That was a moment in my life, and I didn't know whether I'd ever recover. I just said, we'll see. Because we can't control the outcomes in our life. We can't control whether we sink a putt every time, make a basket, find love or success. But by making a good effort over time, and we can control our efforts, we're more likely to achieve our goal than not making the effort. So that's what I knew at the time instinctively. I couldn't have articulated it then, but I started doing push-ups before I left the hospital bed. And I started doing strength training, and I couldn't do any running or jumping or anything, of course, for months. But that did, look, everyday life I view as a form of spiritual weight training. If you don't lift any weights, you don't get any stronger. So that was a weight I had to lift. And sometimes, and many of us can relate to this idea, that climbing out of a deep, dark hole, whatever that may be in our life, can give us the strength to climb the mountain. So sometimes we overcompensate. We're pushing our way back to the baseline, and then we start rising fairly quickly. So that's what happened, and I did recover enough. Maybe it opened me up to meeting that old guy in the gas station about 3 a.m. He didn't look like Nick Nolte, who played him in the movie. Well, he inspired me somehow. I remembered him years later, and when I wrote the book, just like Daniel-san had Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, or Frodo had Gandalf, or King Arthur, young Arthur had Merlin the magician. Castaneda had Don Juan the Brujo in his books. The student-mentor relationship was a classic one, and I chose that meeting with the old guy, the eccentric old guy, to convey ideas, because I was 34 at the time I wrote the book. And who's going to listen to a 34-year-old, But Socrates, they'll listen to. And the old guy did remind me of that ancient Greek sage, Socrates, and that's why I ended up calling him that in the book. So I hope that responds to your question.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's very important to have, like in any field in life, whether it's, if you're playing soccer, you need a coach. If you are playing baseball, you need a coach, right? And definitely figures like that are important for the game of life, right? What would be your take on the importance of having a mentor for people?
Well, I often remind people, I'm not here for people to trust me. I get put up on a pedestal a lot. I'm here to help people trust themselves. But doing an exercise in front of a mirror can give you very good feedback, or getting your video with someone's phone, you can see yourself. And a coach is like a smart mirror,
right? Because
they presumably bring experience and insight, perspective, and they can give you the proper feedback to help you improve. And sometimes that's very useful. But the funny thing is, in my life, my coaches were really great organizers. They cared a lot. They were invested in me and the rest of the team. But they weren't experts at biomechanics. They couldn't say, just move your leg this way or move your arm this way. I had to figure it out myself. Even my earliest trampoline coach, he was a printer, but his kids loved trampolines, so he bought a trampoline center. And during the explosion of that popularity, way back when, and so we had to figure it out ourselves. And in doing that, I think it helped to analyze and ultimately to teach, because I just love teaching those kinds of activities. You know, in October, I'm sorry, next February, I'm going to turn 80 years old, and I tried bouncing on a trampoline the other day.
Wow.
Last week, actually. I hadn't been on a trampoline for 7
Right.
years. Here in Brooklyn, New York, you know, we don't have a car, so I had to bicycle over there. And yeah, it was a very interesting experience. Not having done it for 7 years, I had to take it easy, progressively, and it was a lot of fun. Most people know how much fun it is jumping in the air. It's almost impossible to be depressed and jump on a trampoline at the same time.
Right. By the way, you don't look 79 or 80 at all. And I think it speaks to your practices. Are there practices that you still do, you know, for the inner work that you were talking about?
Yes. Older people need more exercise than younger people. Younger people are running around active anyway. Older people need to do more exercise. And I spend a good deal of my morning, most of our morning, Joy and I, my wife and I both are quite active. I still press to a handstand and, you know, do various things. Core exercises, keep spine neutral for the back. A lot of them look like physical therapy because I've seen PTs a lot. So yeah, I stay quite active. Joy and I happen to be vegetarians for maybe 55 years now or 60 years. We haven't eaten any meat, but that's not for everybody. Again, no perfect diet, no best diet. People have to find what works for them. Pure, you know, veganism doesn't work for everybody, but some people it works very well for. So again, life, we have to experiment and respect our own bodies. Don't impose a philosophy, no matter how elegant, onto one's body.
Hey, a quick pause. If you're listening to this and thinking, I need more peace in my day, more clarity in my mind, then I'll really encourage you to check out The Art of Living. The Art of Living offers a technique called Sky Breath Meditation, used by CEOs, pro athletes, and high performers around the world to recharge their energy, clear that mental fog, and reset the nervous system in minutes. They offer programs both online and in person. It is science-backed and it works. Head to artofliving.org to learn more. Right, that's an interesting phenomenon. And while you were talking about, like, you know, exercising every day, it takes a certain discipline, right? And you talk about the balance between discipline and surrender. And I think that those are very intricate, subtle nuances to the inner world, right? Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, Muhammad Ali, the great boxer and humanitarian, he once said, to be a champion, it takes will and skill, but will is far more important than skill. It's all about will. And, you know, will doesn't just descend upon us like, oh, I need more willpower. It doesn't work that way. And you know, if we're motivated to do something, we don't need willpower because we're motivated to do it. You know, how many of us have done things we were not at all motivated to do? Take the trash out. Maybe we're not really motivated to do it, but we do it because it needs doing. So I think, you know, there was a wise sage named Shoma Morita, a Japanese psychiatrist, who said two things. He said, first of all, to live wisely and well, you need to do three things. First, accept whatever thoughts or emotions are coming up as natural to you in the moment. Second, focus on a constructive purpose, what needs doing in your life. And third, do what needs to be done in line with your purpose, not in line with Dan Millman's philosophy or a holy book you read, but what is your purpose? What is your aim? You know, in the Peaceful Warrior movie, you may remember that scene in which Dan and Socrates walk up they hike up that steep hill, and Dan has a revelation at the top, and he says, you know, Soc, I just had I just realized that it's not the destination that makes us happy, it's the journey. Well, that has a certain amount of wisdom, because most of our life is on the journey, not reaching the destination. But without a destination in mind, there is no journey. We just wander around. From our point A, we need a point B that we're aiming toward. I believe each of us is a hardwired goal seeker. When I looked at my little granddaughter when she was crawling across the floor, she wasn't crawling to get a workout. She was crawling because she wanted her brother's shiny toy, and she was aiming for it. There was something about it she wanted. So I think from a very young age, we're hardwired goal seekers. And in fact, I would define success as making progress toward a goal that's meaningful to oneself. Making progress. If we're going up a mountain, by every step of the way, by definition, we're failing because we haven't reached the top yet. But if we define every step in the right direction as success, then we're just succeeding one after the next, succeeding. But I don't recommend that people aim for success. That's an abstract idea that maybe is the mountaintop, but I recommend people aim for excellence. Because success is not under our control, but excellence is. And the more excellence we bring to everyday moments, including breathing, the basics of life, walking, moving, relaxing, the better off we'll be, striving for excellence. And in fact, a young man came up to me once. I gave a talk at a small college. This is some years ago. And he came up to me afterward and said, Dan, I enjoyed your talk. You had mentioned that you do these personal one-on-one consultations sometimes. And he said, but you must charge a lot of money for your time. So what can you tell a poor college student for $1? And he handed me his dollar. And I smiled, I accepted it, and I told him 6 words which could change his life. It was a lifetime practice. And those 6 words were here and now, breathe and relax. And there is entire teachings behind all those words. And all of us deal with stress in our lives. But stress, hey, I can tell anyone how to not have any stress at all. Don't care about anything. But that's not realistic advice. There are books written today about not giving up, all that stuff. But the point is, we do care. We care about our loved ones. We care about our aims and goals in life and care about helping others and so on. So stress will be a part of our life. But stress only occurs when the mind resists what is. That causes turbulence, resistance. And life is going to unfold just as it likes. So why resist? Why not? This is the surrender part you brought up before. This is the part about surrendering to the moment. A colleague and friend of mine named Byron Katie used to say, which is better? I wish I hadn't lost my job, or I lost my job. Now what will I do?
Yeah, it's the second one.
So instead of, it's not about surrendering as in giving up or capitulating to life. In fact, surrender can be the most intelligent approach to any moment, whatever arises. It's the way a martial artist deals with an attack. They don't fight force with force. They get out of the way and use the force for their advantage. So that's what surrender really means, is to the moment. What is the moment bringing to us right now, and going with that. Like improvisational acting. Saying yes to the moment. And how can I use this?
This is such a great reminder.
And so that's the surrender part, rather than just forcing our way through life. Many of us play God. We say, this should be, that shouldn't be. But who knows?
And it brings so much relaxation just to live like this. Like as you're describing it, like I'm getting a reminder myself. And, I've had a busy day, for example, today, and, it's always go, go, go. But then when you hear it, even just the thought of it, like I could notice myself just easing up into the moment and being like, this is what it is. This is how it is right now.
Here and now, breathe and relax. Exactly.
You also talked about that all of us are seeking meaningful goals, right? What is Dan Millman's goal right now?
Oh, it's easy.
Yeah.
Sharing with you
Well.
and your audience.
That's wonderful. And then in the bigger scheme of things, like what is it that you're working on right now?
It continues to be, after 18 books, written, it only took me 40 years to write them. And each one of them, I never wrote a book just to write another book. It always, when I wrote Way of the Peaceful Warrior, after that, I didn't write another book for 10 years. I said what I had to say. But then I met a new mentor in my life, which I tell about in my culminating work called Peaceful Heart, Warrior Spirit, the true story of my spiritual quest. I worked with over a 20-year period of preparation. I worked with 4 radically different teachers. And they were heavy hitters in their field. One I called the professor, and he created a university for altered states of consciousness, for illumination. And the second I called the guru, who was a more traditional, you're relating to the divine through his body, mind, and so on. He was transparent to the divine, and Joy and I were in his community on and off for maybe 8 years. And then I found the warrior the warrior priest, and finally the sage. Well, when I met the warrior priest, after I'd written Way of the Peaceful Warrior, there was so much new information and exciting information I wanted to share. I wrote my second book, which was Sacred Journey of the Peaceful Warrior, and that was another story, like Way of the Peaceful Warrior. But then people said, well, Dan, I found your first 2 books inspiring, but how do you apply all these ideas to everyday life? So I wrote my third book, which wasn't a story because there was too much information. It was called No Ordinary Moments. That book was a peaceful warrior's guide to everyday life. And then each book organically came after that. But now I'm retired. So I continue to teach in this form, even in a podcast. I continue to offer seminars at various places, workshops, and so on. And people can always find my website to check that out if they're interested. But that's my purpose. I feel most on purpose. On the other hand, I just emptied our dishwasher in our apartment here in Brooklyn, and I was on purpose as well, like a meditation. Everything becomes a meditation.
And I noticed like there are 2 different themes that are playing out here. Like, like a part of you who's a student who met these different teachers along the way of your life. And then there's a part of you which is a teacher and a mentor who is sharing that wisdom with, whether it's in the form of the books or through the medium of this podcast or through the movie that got made. Now, which gives you more fulfillment, or both gives you equal amounts of fulfillment? Like which arena of your life personally for you do you resonate with more?
Well, there has been a gradual shift. That's a very good question because it's easy for a teacher to take on that role and get attached to it. And I am always the teacher, and I am always explaining things. But my kids, they're grown now. They're very smart themselves, and they don't want me as a teacher. They want me as a dad. And the grandkids, same way. So when I was very young, there was an older boy who was really streetwise. His name was Steve Yusa, Japanese. And Steve was my mentor. He taught me to throw a football and to run and do all sorts of things. And at the same time, there were some younger kids in our neighborhood. And so I became their teacher. So I was able to, from a very young age, to be a student and a teacher. And those roles have continued. I hope I'm still learning from everyday life, even refining the breath. I have studied about 4 or 5 different martial arts in my life, starting with judo and a little boxing, and then karate, Okinawan style, Okinawa-te, and then Aikido. I got a black belt in that. And then elements of the Filipino arts, Kali, Eskrima, Arnis. And finally, the most sophisticated art I ever learned was called Sistema. And they emphasize relaxing and breathing for combat and for everyday life. And there are various principles of breathing. Pendulum, our breath is meant to be back and forth like a pendulum, swinging throughout the day, Also, sufficiency. You don't need to breathe deeper than you really need to in any given moment. Otherwise, you get tense. If everyone out there just wants to take a really deep breath,
yeah, there's so much effort there. Yeah,
they're going to feel the tension in that breath, in the shoulders and the upper chest. But if you breathe as deeply as you need to, and no deeper, that's perfect, sufficiency. And there are other, in through the nose, everyone pretty much agrees on that. Some people teach out through the nose, but in Sistema they're more active, so they teach out through the mouth, in through the nose, out through the mouth. And there are various principles of breathing, but I'm still practicing. I'm still improving. And because if I can't be a good role model, I mean, Gandhi said, "My life is my teaching." And Albert Schweitzer had a wonderful quote. He was a saintly man, a doctor, and he used to say, in influencing other people, example is not the main thing, it's the only thing. So that's why we all of us are teachers. The question is, what are we teaching? We're teaching by our example, and people are paying attention to us. We think, oh, nobody's paying attention to me, but actually, yes, they are. We influence people around us just by our example. And in fact, walking into a room relaxed and breathing will tend to influence everyone else in the room who notices you.
That's wonderful. I mean, just talking to you, I feel like I'm talking to my guru in a way, because he speaks similar wisdom, and I feel relaxed every time I listen to him, even if it's through a video. But anyways, Dan, for a lot of our listeners, let's say if they're going through relationship struggles or office struggles, or they're caught up in their everyday life, right? Where do they start? What's the first step?
Well, relationships are one of the ultimate teachings. Socrates used to say, by the way, not my Socrates, but the ancient Greek, who had a very difficult marriage. Apparently his wife harangued him a lot. He used to say, by all means marry. He said, if you choose well, you'll be happy. And if you don't choose well, you'll become a philosopher. And, relationships teach us so much about our lives, not just with an intimate other, but so-called other, but family. Ram Dass used to say, oh, you think you're enlightened?
Yeah.
Go visit your family.
That's true.
Most of us can relate to that, where we revert to that teenager or child in dealing with our parents. And they still see us, the overlay of our young self. So it can be difficult visiting family. But all relationships of every kind teach us so much about ourselves. It's not always pleasant. It's like if you see a well and it looks very peaceful inside the well, like in a forest somewhere, there's this well and there's flowers growing around the top maybe, or some plants. But if you shine a light inside that well, you see maybe some creepy crawlies, you see what's in the darkness and the shadow elements of our character. And so awareness is healing, ultimately. They say you got to feel it to heal it, But, and it's not easy, but it's so important. That's why every spiritual and psychological and educational tradition agrees. Know thyself. Because if we don't really know ourselves, if we only have a self-image, the person we present to the world, if what you see is not really what you get, we end up making the right decision for the wrong person, the one we thought we were. And many of us have made that in that relationship arena, maybe for the person we thought we were, or the career arena. Was it Joseph Campbell who said, sometimes we climb to the top of our professional ladder only to realize it's leaning against the wrong wall. I know many people who've changed in midstream. They've turned a midlife crisis into a mid-course correction and taken a different path.
Right. An intelligent person will be able to turn any challenge into an opportunity if you're aware.
Exactly. Or at least a wise person
A wise person, yes.
will
A
be
wise
able to
person.
do that. Exactly.
Finally, Dan, if you had one piece of advice for our listeners to live beyond the known, that's the name of the show, what would it be?
Well, we already covered,
We already
don't
covered.
compare yourself to other people.
That's true.
But also, it's so important to, we hear the words, surrender. Oh, what a lovely word, surrender. But we don't often see how it applies to us in our life. Let's say we're at a restaurant and we're looking forward to this particular dessert. It's our favorite dessert. And we get the meal, now it's okay, now it's time for dessert. We order it and the waiter person says, oh, I'm sorry, we just gave out the last piece. See that person at the table next to you enjoying it? We just ran out. And you have a moment where you go, wait a minute, but it's on the menu. I came here a long ways just to blah, 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 blah. Or, oh, okay, I have a chance to try something new. That's how we just surrender. That's how we do it in everyday life, to make it over our way. So I think what I would offer is to trust the process of our life unfolding. That, see, faith, F-A-I-T-H, faith, I would define as the courage to live as if everything that happens is for our highest good and learning. If we remember that, it's a different way to live. Now, do I know that's true? No, I don't know that's true. Somebody who is abused and beaten up and practically killed, to tell them, oh, it's for your highest good and learning, well, that may be a little offensive to them. But if we can live as if we have the courage to do that, it makes us more resourceful. And we make use of whatever happens for that spiritual weight training. We use it to lift and to grow stronger. Sometimes when I'm speaking with an audience, Jitesh, I will say, if anyone here has ever experienced physical, emotional, or mental pain in their life, could you raise your hand? Of course, all the hands go up. And I go, well, we can agree on different things, or disagree. Because if we agree on everything, only one of us is necessary. But I hope we can agree on this. Wouldn't you say that difficulty, that pain, that adversity made you a little bit wiser in sense of perspective, maybe made you a little bit stronger and brought you to this moment, to who you are? And most people agree with that. So that's why we need to understand that every difficulty in life, every problem is here to help us grow stronger and wiser. That's why we're all peaceful warriors in training.
Wonderful. Dan, I thank you so much, not just for this podcast, but also for your life's work. Your teachings, your learnings have inspired so many. Peaceful Warrior remains one of my favorite movies. And like I said earlier, before we started filming, it was a major part of my initial spiritual inclination. Like when I watched the movie, I was very inspired and I was like, I have to learn how to breathe. I have to learn how to meditate. I have to learn how to have a sense of say over my own mind. And you have personally, inspired for me and for countless others, I'm sure. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Jitesh. Let me end with a story since you do
Yes.
meditation.
Yes.
When I was a young coach at Stanford,
Yeah.
I had a reputation as something of an outlier, a bit of an oddball. Because back then, in the 60s, people, only the outliers and hippies were meditating or doing yoga. Now it's, of course, exploded in interest. So one of the coaches from USC, University of Southern California, brought his team up to Stanford for a competition. And he whispered to me before the meeting, he said, Dan, I heard a rumor. You have your athletes meditate before the competitions. And I went, oh, no. I'd never do anything that strange. I said, I have them meditate during the competition. That's a bit of a koan. I'll let your listeners chew on.
That's wonderful, and there's a very deep meaning behind it, and thank you for sharing that with everybody.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Dan. Take care. Hey, a quick pause. I want to share a resource I've personally trusted for years. And when it comes to living well, not just in moments of meditation or reflection, but in everyday life, what we put into our bodies matters deeply. And that is why I love Shri Shri Tattva. It's a brand rooted in authentic Ayurveda, from daily wellness supplements to natural personal care. All crafted with ancient wisdom and modern purity. No shortcuts, no hypes, just products that support real well-being from the inside out. For me, it's all about alignment between what I practice and what I teach and how I live. And Shri Shri Tattva helps me bring some of that care into my daily routine. You can explore their offerings at shrishrittattvausa.com. I highly recommend checking them out. The link is also in my description below. I want to share something I've been personally loving. Shankara's Ghee Sutra is one of those rare products where ancient wisdom meets modern skincare. It's crafted from ghee that's churned 10,000 times. Yes, 10,000. Blended with Ayurvedic botanicals like hibiscus, bamboo, and it penetrates deep, up to 7 layers, to nourish, hydrate, and bring your skin back to life. No harsh chemicals, no surface level fixes, just deep, authentic care from the inside out, like everything we talk about on this show. You can check it out at shankara.com